This question is for Aliyah. This being your third season, it seems like you've been a lot more assertive or spicy this year.
Spicy?
Spicy. That's good. I mean, I feel like for me, it's just my approach. It's just coming in and just trying to be dominant in anything the team needs. And so if that gives off spicy, which I really don't think it does, I feel like I'm like kind of quiet.
Spice?
No, I just know it's spicy. But yeah, I feel like that's just been my mindset, is just coming in and just being the player that I need to be for us. Whatever that looks like, it looks like.
The Indiana Fever weren't supposed to be here. Not this soon. Not with the bruises and the doubters still fresh from the last two seasons. But on a night that would decide everything, the Fever walked into their showdown with the Washington Mystics carrying the weight of history.
With the MVP, okay? Bow, bow, bow! Hell yeah. You already know what it is. Dubs and you already know what it is.
This wasn't just a basketball game. It was a battle for respect, redemption, and relevance in a league where every narrative seemed to orbit Caitlin Clark. Yet when the final buzzer sounded, it wasn't just Clark who stole the moment. It was Aliyah Boston, raw, unfiltered, and unapologetic, whose post-game reaction told the story of a team that had been overlooked for far too long. For weeks, the Indiana Fever lived on the playoff bubble. One night, they looked like contenders capable of shocking the league. The next, they looked like rookies fumbling under the spotlight. By the time they reached Washington, the equation was brutally simple: beat the Mystics and punch their ticket to the postseason, or watch the dream collapse in their hands. The Fever hadn't tasted playoff basketball since 2016. 8 long years of mediocrity. 8 years of headlines about dysfunction, draft busts, and wasted talent. But now, they had Caitlin Clark, the rookie who turned every arena into a sellout. They had Aliyah Boston, last year's Rookie of the Year, and the foundation around which Indiana rebuilt. And together they carried the Fever into a do-or-die game that felt less like the end of a season and more like the beginning of a revolution.
Did you guys feel like this was always possible to make the playoffs? Did you ever have moments of concern or doubt? And what allowed you guys to just keep, the eyes on the prize more or less?
Yeah, I think, just being someone in this locker room, you never doubt yourself and what you're capable of, no matter what happened.
From the opening tip, the Mystics made one thing clear: Indiana was going to have to earn it. Washington threw bodies at Clark, sending double teams to force the ball out of her hands. Every drive was contested, every three-pointer chased down with desperation. But this is where Aliyah Boston showed why she's the anchor. While Clark battled pressure on the perimeter, Boston went to work inside, posting up, drawing fouls, ripping rebounds away from Mystics defenders. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't viral, she was just dominant. Still, Washington refused to fold. Ariel Atkins lit up from deep. Natasha Cloud barked orders and pushed the pace. For long stretches, it felt like Indiana's playoff hopes were slipping through their fingers. Then, the Fever found their moment.
Late in the third quarter, Clark caught the ball near half court. The Mystics swarmed her instantly. Instead of forcing a contested shot, she whipped a pass inside to Boston, who muscled through contact for an and-one finish. The crowd gasped, then groaned. That one play summed up the entire Fever blueprint: Clark's gravity on the perimeter, Boston's dominance in the paint. It wasn't the last time. Time and again, Clark used her vision to feed Boston, who carved the Mystics apart with relentless efficiency. The duo wasn't just surviving, they were dictating. And slowly, the game began tilting. With under 2 minutes left, Clark pulled up from deep, her signature logo 3 splashing through the net. Gainbridge Fieldhouse may have been hundreds of miles away, but fans watching on TV erupted like they were courtside. On the next possession, Boston sealed her defender, took a perfect entry pass, and powered in a layup that put Indiana up for good. The final horn sounded: Fever 87, Mystics 82. For the first time in 8 years, the Indiana Fever were playoff bound.
Powers off the screen, connects from 3. It's that same spot.
But here's where the story takes its twist. After the game, all eyes naturally turned to Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom, the league's marketing engine, the player whose name dominated every headline. But when reporters swarmed Aliyah Boston, they got something unexpected.
How would you describe the locker room after the game today, just being able to sell?
Well, we didn't make a TikTok, so
A surge of honesty that cut through the polished post-game cliches. Boston didn't hold back. She spoke about the pain of being overlooked, about how people acted like Indiana was only Caitlin Clark and nothing else. She reminded the world that this was her second year in the league, her second season carrying this franchise before Clark even arrived. And then came the line that set social media on fire. Boston leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but fiery. Y'all better put respect on this team. We're not just a one-woman show. We fight together, we win together. Unfiltered, unapologetic. The room went silent, then buzzed with tension.
The Fever's playoff berth was supposed to be the perfect Caitlin Clark fairy tale. The rookie who, quote, saved the league, drags a forgotten franchise into the postseason. That's how ESPN and national media wanted to frame it. But Boston's words shattered that script. Her message wasn't aimed at Clark directly. Insiders say the two shared genuine respect, but it was aimed at everyone who erased the rest of the roster. Everyone who talked about Clark's assists without mentioning who finished those plays. Everyone who acted like Aliyah Boston was a passenger instead of a driver. Fans immediately split online. Clark's loyal supporters insisted the rookie had earned the spotlight. Boston's defenders clapped back, arguing she had carried Indiana before Clark's arrival and was still the team's foundation. Suddenly, the Fever weren't just a playoff story, they were a drama. A narrative tug-of-war over credit, legacy, and leadership. As Indiana celebrated on the court, Boston's comments lingered. Clark smiled through her interviews, gracious as always, but even she couldn't ignore the shift. For the first time all season, her spotlight wasn't entirely her own. The Fever had made the playoffs, but Boston had made her statement, and in the process, she lit a fire that would carry far beyond one game. Because the question wasn't just whether Indiana could win in the playoffs. The real question was this: would the world finally recognize Aliyah Boston as the co-star of the story? Or would the spotlight on Caitlin Clark burn brighter than ever? That's where things get complicated, because what happened next, in the locker room, in the press, and on social media, turned this victory into a storm of controversy that nobody saw coming. The Indiana Fever's playoff berth should have been a fairy tale. After years of irrelevance, they finally punched their ticket to the postseason, led by a rookie phenom in Caitlin Clark and a rising superstar in Aliyah Boston. But instead of uniting the narrative, that night against the Washington Mystics cracked it wide open. Boston's unfiltered reaction after the win didn't just make headlines, it lit a fuse, and the blast was immediate.
By the time players left the arena, Boston's post-game comments were already trending on social media. Her words, "Y'all better put respect on this team," appeared in bold across ESPN's late night scroll, while Bleacher Report pushed clips of her fiery delivery with the caption, "Aliyah Boston sends a message."
The entire staff, up to the head, just made great decisions when people went down on who to bring in, the type of people to bring in, and that was really our mindset. We never doubted ourselves. We never doubted that we could be in the playoffs. Even if things looked like it got harder, for us it was about sticking together, and I think through everything you're able to see that, us play with joy, us play together regardless of who's on that floor.
Some outlets framed it as leadership, a young star standing up for her teammates. Others spun it as frustration, maybe even jealousy, directed at Caitlin Clark's towering spotlight. Within 24 hours, debate shows were off to the races. On First Take, Stephen A. Smith praised Boston's passion, but warned, when you've got Caitlin Clark on your team, you better understand, the cameras are going to follow her. On FS1, analysts wondered aloud if Boston was tired of being overshadowed. The narrative was no longer about the Fever clinching a playoff spot. It was about whether a rift was forming inside the team.
On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, Fever fans tore into each other. Clark loyalists argued that without her 28 points and 7 assists against Washington, Indiana would be home watching the postseason. Boston's great, but let's not kid ourselves, one viral post read. Caitlin is the reason this team even matters. Boston defenders pushed back hard. Put some respect on her name, another fan wrote. She was Rookie of the Year before Clark even got here. She's been carrying this team since day one. The hashtag #RespectBoston began trending, while Clark's fanbase launched their own counter hashtag, #ClarkEra. For a team that just ended an 8-year playoff drought, the mood should have been pure celebration. Instead, it felt like a civil war over credit and recognition.
Reports from The Athletic claim that Fever players privately supported Boston's comments. According to one source, Aliyah just said what a lot of the locker room was already feeling. Everyone loves Caitlin, but the media only ever talks about her. We're all out here grinding. Another anonymous player reportedly added, "We want Caitlin to shine, but this isn't a one-player league. Aliyah's our leader. She sets the tone." But behind the supportive quotes, insiders also whispered about tension, not between Clark and Boston themselves. Teammates described their relationship as professional and respectful, but between how the outside world talked about them.
Here's Sims, nice pocket pass. Boston foul line jumper.
One Fever staffer put it bluntly, "It's not them against each other, it's them against the narrative." Interestingly, Caitlin Clark herself never bit. In her post-game comments, she gave Boston full credit. "Aliyah was huge tonight. I can't even count how many times she bailed me out when I was double-teamed. We don't win without her. It was classic Clark, gracious, diplomatic, team first. But her silence on the media storm afterward only fueled speculation. Some fans praised her maturity, saying she refused to feed the drama. Others accused her of dodging the conversation, letting Boston be the bad cop while she remained the golden child. Either way, the silence only made the noise louder.
If the national media added gasoline, social media lit the match. Clips of Boston's post-game firestorm racked up millions of views in hours. TikTok edits showed her quotes side by side with highlight reels of Clark, forcing viewers to choose a side. One post that went viral featured Boston flexing after a crucial bucket, captioned, "The real leader of the Fever." Another cut to Clark drilling logo threes with the caption, "This is who changed the game." The comment sections turned brutal. Fans accused each other of disrespect, bias, even racism. Some Clark fans claimed Boston was jealous. Boston fans clapped back, accusing Clark supporters of dismissing black women who've carried the league long before her arrival. It was no longer just about basketball. It was cultural. It was generational. It was personal.
As the storm surrounding Aliyah Boston's post-game comments intensified, whispers turned into chatter, and chatter turned into full-blown rumors. What began as subtle speculation in fan forums quickly spilled into blogs, podcasts, and even mainstream outlets desperate for clicks. The narrative was seductive. Is the Indiana Fever locker room divided? Some reports, based on little more than anonymous sources and social media guesswork, claimed players were quietly choosing sides. The theory was that half the locker room gravitated toward Boston, drawn to her leadership, her size, her toughness in the paint. The other half, the rumor mill suggested, leaned toward Clark, the rookie phenom whose superstardom had transformed the franchise's relevance overnight. Other whispers pointed fingers higher up. According to speculation, Indiana executives were uneasy about Boston's fiery comments. Why? Because Indiana's entire marketing campaign, ticket sales, sponsorships, national TV spots, was built on Caitlin Clark, and Boston's public demand for respect threatened to disrupt that polished narrative. Were these claims rooted in truth? Not necessarily. Nothing was confirmed, nothing verifiable. But in the digital age, rumors don't need evidence to survive. They thrive on ambiguity, spreading like wildfire in the spaces where facts fall silent. And so, by the end of the week, the headlines had shifted. No longer were writers asking, how far can the Fever go in the playoffs? Instead, the story had twisted into a soap opera headline. Are Aliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark on a collision course?
If fans and pundits thought Aliyah Boston would backpedal, soften her words, or smooth things over the cameras, they were sorely mistaken. Days after her viral post-game moment, Boston sat in front of microphones again, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. "I said what I said," she told Indy Star. "This isn't about me versus Caitlin. It's about giving this team the respect we've earned. Every single player sacrifices. Every single player puts in the work. That deserves recognition." It wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness. It was conviction. And while outsiders dissected every syllable for hidden meaning, Boston's teammates made their feelings crystal clear. Veteran guard Erica Wheeler reposted Boston's comments with a single-word caption, "Facts." Forward Nylissa Smith added her own, "We all dogs, don't forget it." Publicly, the Fever stood united, but here's the irony. The more they tried to show solidarity, the more the outside world twisted the narrative. Each show of support was framed as taking Boston's side. Each moment of Clark's silence was spun as avoidance, or worse, disagreement.
By now, Indiana's playoff berth felt less like a sports story and more like an ongoing season of reality TV. Every practice clip leaked online became fodder for debate. Every sideline interaction was slowed down, zoomed in, and dissected frame by frame. Did Boston roll her eyes when Clark got a camera close-up? Did Clark frown when Boston was the first one interviewed? Did a high five last a second too short? In the hands of fans and media, these harmless moments became plot twists, fuel for the drama. Storylines were created where none existed. Conflict was invented where none had been proven. And here's the hard truth. In today's sports culture, perception can be far more powerful than reality. The Fever weren't just living through a playoff push. They were living inside a spotlight so hot it could melt steel. Every movement, every gesture, every word was captured, magnified, and judged. For better or worse, Indiana had become the WNBA's main event. Part basketball team, part reality show, part cultural phenomenon. And the real question was no longer whether they could win games. It It was whether they could survive the spotlight. Heading into the playoffs, Indiana carried not just momentum, but controversy. Could they rally together and prove Boston's words true, that they were more than just a Caitlin Clark team? Or would the pressure and spotlight pull them apart at the worst possible time? Aliyah Boston's unfiltered reaction turned one night of celebration into a season-defining debate. But the real question loomed ahead. How would the Fever handle the storm when the playoffs actually began? Because if the Mystics game was just the setup, the postseason would be the proving ground. And what happened next would decide not only their playoff fate, but the future of their franchise. The Indiana Fever had made the playoffs. Aliyah Boston had spoken her truth, and Caitlin Clark had gracefully sidestepped the storm. But as the confetti settled and the headlines rolled in, the Fever season entered its most critical chapter yet, the postseason. A place where reputations are made, where stars are forged in pressure, and where all the noise either fades into irrelevance or explodes into legacy. The matchup didn't care about narratives. It didn't care about hashtags or who sold more jerseys or who got more SportsCenter segments. The playoffs are ruthless. They only care about results. Indiana walked in as underdogs, facing veteran rosters who had seen it all, teams that had playoff scars, not just playoff dreams. But here's the twist. Controversy didn't break the Fever. If anything, it fueled them. Game 1 of the postseason, it wasn't Clark hitting logo threes that set the tone. It was Aliyah Boston, bullying defenders inside, screaming after and-one finishes, and anchoring the defense like a brick wall. She looked like the leader she'd always been, the same leader she insisted she was when she told reporters to put respect on her team. And suddenly, the conversation shifted. Analysts who had spent weeks questioning whether Boston was jealous of Clark now admitted she was the glue, the foundation, the heart of the Fever's rise. Boston's reaction after clinching playoffs wasn't a tantrum, it was a warning shot. And in the postseason, she backed it up. But don't mistake this for a one-woman show. Caitlin Clark thrived too. The playoffs were her stage, and she played it to perfection. The double teams didn't stop. The physicality didn't stop. But Clark's response was pure poise. When defenses collapsed on her, she found Boston. When lanes opened, she attacked. And when the Fever needed a dagger, she wasn't afraid to pull up from the logo, the same way she had done all season. If Boston was the backbone, Clark was the spark. Together, they didn't just coexist. They elevated one another.
That's what made Indiana's playoff run so compelling. For months, people painted this as a one-star team. First, Clark was the savior. Then Boston demanded respect. But in the playoffs, the truth became undeniable. The Fever were a duo, a 1-2 punch unlike anything the WNBA had seen in years. Boston's dominance inside forced defenses to collapse. Clark's gravity outside stretched them thin. And the rest of the roster, Nalisa Smith, Kelsey Mitchell, Erica Wheeler, suddenly had the space and confidence to shine. What was once portrayed as tension became chemistry. What was once spun as a feud became synergy. And that's where Aliyah Boston's unfiltered reaction takes on new meaning. Her words weren't about jealousy. They were about balance, about fairness, about rewriting a story that was being told without the full truth. By standing up, she carved her place in history. She reminded the league, the media, and the fans that stars come in pairs. That Caitlin Clark may have brought the cameras, but Aliyah Boston kept the lights on. And that's the kind of statement that lasts far beyond one playoff run.
Zoom out for a moment. The Fever making the playoffs wasn't just about Indiana, it was about the WNBA itself. For years, the league struggled to capture consistent national attention. Now, every Fever game was a headline. Ratings spiked, ticket sales surged, merch flew off shelves. The Fever weren't just a playoff team, they were a cultural event. And that spotlight, for better or worse, forced difficult but necessary conversations about how women's basketball is covered, who gets credit, and how narratives are shaped. Aliyah Boston's reaction was a crack in the facade, exposing the imbalance of coverage and demanding a more complete picture. So, what does this mean for the future? For the Fever, it means expectations. They're no longer the underdog story. They're the team with the most watched rookie, the most dominant young center, and a roster that knows how to fight. Every year going forward, the question will be, how far can Clark and Boston take them? For Aliyah Boston, it means her voice has power. She showed that one unfiltered moment could reshape an entire narrative. She is no longer just Clark's teammate. She is a franchise cornerstone. For Caitlin Clark, it means continuing to balance the spotlight with leadership. She will always be the face of the league, but how she shares that stage with Boston will define whether Indiana becomes a dynasty or a drama.
The Fever's playoff run may end in triumph or heartbreak, but one thing is already certain. Aliyah Boston's unfiltered reaction after clinching against the Mystics will be remembered as the turning point. It was the moment she demanded respect, the moment she shifted the conversation, the moment she carved her name alongside Clark's, not beneath it. And if Indiana truly is building the next great WNBA dynasty, history will look back and say, this is where it began. So now it's your turn. Do you think the Fever can actually become a championship dynasty with Boston and Clark? Who deserves more credit for this playoff push? Caitlin Clark, Aliyah Boston, or the whole roster together? And here's the big one. Was Boston right to call out the media, or should she have let the playoff berth speak for itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you hit like if you believe in this Fever duo, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the WNBA's most dramatic storylines. Because if this playoff run is just the beginning, the real story is still to come.